Student pastor with the Anders family, first joined at New Hope Baptist Church. In one Sunday, my youth group grew by 30%. It was amazing. If all the children had been in the age for the student ministry, we'd have probably topped 50%. It was pretty amazing. And now to see these other generations and to realize that the new generation, some of you are just as rude as your parents were. And I was trying to reel them in. For those of you who are still surprised I'm alive, thank you so much. That was just delightful that you would feel that way. And coming from Aunt Janet, it was just absolutely perfect. I promise you that. Boy, there's so many stories. There's so many things to say. There's so many things to think about. Dr. Anders, I always think about that wonderful passage in Proverbs chapter 31 where it talks about the virtuous woman, that her price is far above rubies. And it says, and it's interesting because a lot of people think that Solomon wrote that. It was not. It was written by the mother of King Lemuel, who said, this is what you look for in a wife, and describes all these marvelous virtues. And then toward the end, it says, her children will rise up and bless her. And you know what? I think we had a Proverbs 31 man in Patrick Anders. What an amazing person. What an incredible life. Even to sit here and to listen today and then to think about the legacy. 63 years with his bride. 63 years. How wonderful. Thank you for having that kind of a marriage that inspires your family, that inspires others of us here today. To think about those 6 children and then 20 grandchildren and 2 great-grandchildren. Isn't that amazing? I mean, that is an incredible legacy right there. And I am just so honored to get to be with you today and to be a part of this time. Dr. Rebecca sent me a note and said there's certain things that I want you to make sure you include today. One of them is 23rd Psalm. I don't guess there's a more beloved psalm in all the world, or there's probably not a passage of Scripture that even comes close to being as famous as the 23rd Psalm. David said, the Lord is my shepherd, and I shall not want. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside still waters. He restores my soul, and He guides me in the paths of righteousness for His name's sake. And yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for Thou art with me. He goes from third person to first person in a heartbeat there. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. And Thou dost prepare a table before me in the presence of mine enemies. And Thou hast anointed my head with oil, and my cup overflows. Think about Patrick Anders' life when I read this part. Surely goodness and mercy will follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. The Anders family became, honestly, an extended part of my family. They took me in as that young youth minister and encouraged me and fed me, and obviously they did a wonderful job in that area of making sure, and I spent many a day being able to be in their home and to be around their home. It was always like a motel. There were so many people that were coming and going there. Every time we would have a group in from somewhere that were there to sing, like the Cruz family and others. And if you watch Joel Osteen on television in the world's largest church now, the young lady that leads the music there is named Cindy Cruz. She spent a lot of time at the Anders house over those years because they were always so gracious. And if I had to pick a word to describe them, it is that word gracious. They were gracious in the way that they would share the blessings that they had in life. They were gracious to be able to help you through so many different things. And for me, that particular moment in time came when I lost a wife and a child. And when I lost that wife and child in childbirth, it obviously gave me a great deal of anxiety about what would happen one day when I remarried and when my wife would become pregnant, if we were blessed to do that. And we did. I married Robin, and Robin was pregnant, and I didn't want to put a burden on anyone because I knew how anxiety-ridden I would be. And we had chosen a doctor, and we'd gone there a couple of times, and Robin became very, very ill. Dr. Rebecca, you probably remember those days. And I called Dr. Anders, and I said, I know this situation, but Dr. Anders, I'm just so scared. He said, you get her over here to me. And we went to Dr. Anders, and Robin is sitting back there today, and he told her, he said, you're a very sick girl right now. You're very sick, and I'm going to take care of you. And he did, and he ushered us through that time. I never missed an appointment. I was there for every appointment. And then when the evening rolled around that Robin was going to give birth, we didn't know whether we were having a boy or a girl. We didn't want to know. We wanted to be surprised. But I didn't want to be back in the back. I had so much anxiety. I said, I'm just going to stay out in the waiting room. And so while Dr. Patrick Anders was in the back helping to deliver our daughter into the world with Robin, I was the only male that I know of that had his own OBGYN with him and was delivering me through the night out there in the waiting room. So it also will help to dispel many rumors about me that exist in this community to this day of having my own OBGYN. But we made it through that night. And the other night, Robin and I were talking, and Abigail, and as we were talking together, I said, Robin, what was your memory of that night? And she said, they're so vivid. She said there were so many memories. She said, do you remember that before I ever delivered the baby that we'd gone to their house to have Sunday dinner? And she said the whole time I could see him eyeballing me to see what I was eating down there at the other end of the table. She said he was watching me. And she said that last week when I went in for my checkup, I had gained 8 pounds. And which was the most I'd gained, in any one given set of time. And he said, Robin, what did you do this past week? And she said, you told me I could eat fruit. And he said, well, what kind of fruit did you eat? She said, watermelon. He said, I didn't tell you to eat the entire watermelon. And he said, surely there was something else. And she said, well, every night I to go by and get me a banana split from the Dairy Queen, and he said, well, I think you need to cut those out. She said, I don't have the heart to tell him, would you? And so we cut out the banana splits. We were having the baby there that night. Dr. Anderson is back. Robert said that he sat at the foot of the bed and read the newspaper, and they had the Braves game on. And they were watching the Braves game, and he was reading the newspaper, and she said he'd get to certain articles, and he'd go, hey, Robin, listen to this. And he would just read that entire article to her as they sat there. And she said he'd keep reaching up, and he'd keep patting her foot, keep patting her foot. And he kept telling her, you're going to be all right. And we'd pat her foot. And sure enough, that baby was delivered. And remember, I'm out in the waiting room. I don't know if it's a boy or a girl, and they finally come, they get us. You remember, we went back, and he met us in the hallway, and Abigail, I didn't know it was a girl. Remember, she's got a little stocking hat on her head, and he's holding her up like this, just naked, this naked baby. And he's saying, look, Ike, and I'm going, what is it? And he looked at me and said, by your age, I was thinking you would know by now what it is. And he finally laughed, and he was absolutely just shaking all over. He was laughing so hard, and he said, it's a little girl. And I fell down on my knees beside him. And I said, oh, thank you, God. Just thank you. That's the kind of friends. That's the kind of friends they've been to us. We can never thank them enough in a million years for loving us, encouraging us, and being there for us. And I want to read to you some things from the family. Ms. Anders, Dr. Anders said, Proverbs 27 describes my husband. A righteous man walks in his integrity. Now think about what you've watched in here today. How blessed are his sons after him. How blessed are his children after him. I watched today as good a sermon in this service that you could ever be a part of, to see what a godly legacy can do, what it can produce. To watch these children coming up here. I can't tell you the times in their home when on Sunday afternoon, after we would have a meal, they would break out the instruments and they would sit there. they would do music, and your mother, Mrs. Yates, would recite a poem for us. And it was always just the most amazing family. It was such a rich experience to go into that environment. And it was just something. Tim said, my memories of my dad are many, but most of them relate to his love to do yard work and the love that he had for his children to do yard work. I'll try to read these as I believe they were written, all right? And Janet's already mentioned this. Whenever we would take a vacation to Lake Sinclair, he would require us to pick up 2 trash cans full of pine cones for each loop that we would get to do around the lake, or skis or waterboarding. And Daddy seemed to love his time on his John Deere tractor. He loved it so much that his children never got to use the John Deere tractor. Instead, he purchased a 30-inch Craftsman riding lawnmower with a maintenance contract for his children to use to cut the acres of grass on Highway 314. And I guarantee you that Sears regretted the day they ever sold that maintenance contract. One thing I appreciate the most about my dad was the willingness and the sacrifice that he and Mom would make to ensure that each of their children had an opportunity for a paid education. Somehow all the sons took advantage of state schools, but the daughters all went to private colleges. We still have some family issues we're dealing with. And I think his relationships with his daughters was a little different than those with his sons. The most important thing that both my dad and my mom have given to us is the encouragement to have a relationship with Jesus Christ. I look forward to seeing him again one day because of the strong relationship that he has with Jesus and the love for each of his children to encourage them so that they too would have that personal relationship. I can remember many a time seeing my dad sitting in his chair in the family room reading his Bible. And for me, Proverbs 22:1 pretty much sums up the fact that my father could have had a lot of earthly riches, but instead he chose to have a good name. And that verse says, a good name is to be chosen rather than great riches, and favor is better than silver or gold. From Tricia, she said, Daddy told me that when a mama would bring her baby for him to see, he would always laugh and say, oh, what an ugly baby. But that he always did it in a very sweet voice. He didn't do that to Abigail. I'm just telling you, all right? She was special, obviously. If the baby wasn't ugly, then that mama knew that he was kidding. And if the baby was ugly, she thought he was kidding. So either way, he didn't have to lie. I also, when I think about my dad, I think about grocery shopping because he was very utilitarian when it came to what he was going to do with his money and the different things that were going on there. And imagine having 6 children and what that would be like. So providing for his family and saving money were both important to him. And he would check the ads and he would shop every Thursday on his day off. One day there was a sale on chicken at A&P. And my dad would buy whole fryers, and then he would cut them up because it was cheaper to buy the chicken that way. When he asked the butcher how many he could have, and he was told, as many as you want. The butcher was floored when Daddy brought in an empty shopping cart and said, fill it up. So that's the kind of guy that he was right there. Also, this was great. And Buffy is sharing this. She said, a month after Mama and Daddy were married, Grandmother Yates sent this card, and I had a picture of the card. It's 1951. It's absolutely precious. But it was a sympathy card sent to Dr. Anders after marrying Miss Rebecca Anders. They get this sympathy card, and here's what was inscribed. Dearest Pat, if you should be thinking that this is a token of sympathy, then please keep it a deep secret. Because you see, I too have had to live with a Yates. I'm telling you, this is a sharp family right here. She's also said he always claimed that he really wanted to have married a rich, sterile orphan. I'm not sure if that's really true or not. But if you look at that long list of survivors in the obituary, he failed miserably if that was his life's goal. I mean, that was it right there. And then from Mark, and by the way, Mark also was scarred by the trip to Florida because he brought up the chicken story, and I actually went online. you know, he's not as smart as you are, David. And I had to go online and look up the joke and to find it, and you did a good job. You did well, and you also saved me having to tell it right here. But he said his dad would get so tickled, but he told the trip, Mark does, about when they went on a deep sea fishing trip. And this is where, David, maybe he's kind of getting after you because evidently you got sick on the deep sea fishing trip first, but you were not going to be the last. And while David was up, and I'm just going to say this the way it's been written, losing his breakfast on the front of the boat in the loudest and greenest way. Any of you in here ever been seasick? We're relating with you, brother. We're relating with you right there. But listen to this. And all the time holding Kenya's sweet hand. And then he put some parentheses. That's because y'all were just dating. And I guess once you're married, you're on your own right there. And he said, Chris and I were enjoying the bobbing up and down and the ride. And we were out on the bow of the boat the whole time. And when I went to share the event with Daddy, the old Navy seaman, he was hugging the side of the boat. And he had just placed some fresh squid on his hook, and then he got a second look at his eggs and bacon. I'm just reading what's on here, all right? Now, this is Mark, I was really slapping my legs with ROTFL. That stands for rolling on the floor of the boat laughing. And I was looking to share this with somebody, and my new wife, Chris, not seeing the humor of this, he went to look for his brother Tim, but when he found Tim was head down in the center of the boat, not in the mood for such humor. And then here's Mark's sense of humor. I was really lonely that day. Yeah, I guess you were. Daddy always enjoyed providing his family with new surprise pets over the years. And perhaps it was to teach children how to be responsible, or maybe to provide us with a lesson in biology because he did major in biology, you know. Or maybe he liked reliving a simpler time when he had his own dog in an earlier life and he was intent about how he would look after that dog and to take care of him and everything. But whatever the intent, whether it was preconceived or just happenstance, he always had one dog and multiple cats in our home while they were raising all of us kids. And in the early years, it wasn't uncommon, especially around Easter, for him to bring home a few baby ducks or geese or to purchase a pair of green-necked pheasants. And he would build rabbit hutches, and he would breed rabbits, lots of rabbits. That's not a gift right there. That's just biological, all right? And he would buy chicken coops, and he would raise chickens so that we could have fresh eggs. And occasionally, when the hen nested out of sight, we would bring the eggs inside to incubate and to hatch baby chicks. And why all those chicks seemed to become roosters were reasons I could never understand. And I remember raising one named Bubba in the kitchen with Grandma Yates. I'm just reading this, folks. You make your determinations about this family, all right? And for the better part of 2 or 3 decades, we had at least one goat. Now, understand, in rural Fayette County, it was not a big deal. But this started when we lived in southwest Atlanta. And on one occasion, when we got a bottle-fed baby lamb who truly lived up to her name, Messy, and in parentheses, I digress, but David could tell you about shearing her, including her messy hindquarters, with a regular pair of scissors on more than one occasion. I've sent this article in to PETA. They'll be in touch with you very, very soon. And I can remember these boisterous conversations that we would have. One in particular with Tim, who must have been about 7 years old. And my dad and he were walking toward the back of the home on the back portion of our 1-acre lot where we had just left our prize baby lamb in the goat's barn with fresh hay. And Tim asked Dad, hey, what do you think we're going to get next? Dad thought for a moment, and he said, well, I haven't quite decided yet whether it's going to be a giraffe or an elephant. Whoa. You can't imagine the excitement in our neighborhood that was created when Tim told all the neighbors that we were getting a giraffe or an elephant next. They did tell you that's not coming, right, son? Okay, I'm just checking right there. And of course, now I'm telling you, you're watching a family dynamic right here. Mark's getting his brother. This was the same Tim who a few years later was asked to take a bowl full of kitchen scraps to the animals in the backyard where we lived on Highway 314. He's older now, he's probably about 12, and Mom asked him to do this, even though it was Mark's turn to do it. And Mark, remember, he's right, okay? Mark was slaving away on the lawnmower in the front yard. I wish we had violins, we would do it right now. And making large circles on the large section of grass that he was cutting. And even though it would have been shorter for Tim to take the scraps to the goats and the sheep in the backyard and the wooded section, than to go all the way around front where poor old Mark was slaving away, Tim opted to go to the front yard. And he would finally waited for Mark to make that big loop. And then he handed him the bowl of scraps to go to the animals in the backyard and to take it up on the hill. And there were some cross words that were exchanged between Mark and Tim that day. And as the day wound down, Mama told the two brothers that they needed to tell each other that they loved one another. And Tim dutifully complied and said, "I love you, Mark." To which Mark replied, "If you love me, feed my sheep." Somebody give Mark $1. That's a good verse right there. Mark said, "I don't know if any of this is right for the funeral." Neither did I, son, but I wanted to share every bit of it right there. Oh, and there's so many other notes that are here from grandchildren and children, and man, what a blessing. What a blessing. We could stay here all day and we could share. You can look at the American flag and tell what he thought of his country and how he felt about his country and the way that he served his country. And you can look at his family and they rise up and they call him blessed. I guess for me, I always felt like when I would go to the Andrews home, and I promise you I've thought about this many a time, because one of my favorite stories in the Bible is about when Jesus would go to the home of Martha and Mary and Lazarus. And sometimes people forget that people in the ministry just need people sometimes that just love them for just being themselves and not a title that they occupy. And they let them be themselves, whether it's swimming in the swimming pool, whether it's going out back and shooting off M80 firecrackers that were against the law, whether it was playing football in the front yard. Everybody needs that place. And that was my place. That was my family. Those are the people that loved me and encouraged me. And one day, Lazarus died. And when he died, Martha and Mary both reacted in different ways. They heard that Jesus was finally coming back into Bethany, and everybody handles grief in different ways. When Mary heard that Jesus was coming, she stayed in the house. But when Martha heard he was coming, she ran out to meet him. We heard the passage referred to earlier in John chapter 11. And when she went out and she met him, she said to Jesus, "Lord, if you would have been here, my brother would not have died. And even now I know that whatever you ask of God, he will give you." And Jesus said to her, "Your brother will rise again." And Martha said to him, I know that he's going to rise again in the resurrection on the last day. And then Jesus said to her, "You're looking at the resurrection. Tomorrow is Easter Sunday." What an appropriate weekend. Bookends Good Friday, Easter, of the weekend that changed the world. And because the world was changed, Jesus looked at Martha and said, "I am the resurrection. I am the life. And he who believes in me," Patrick Andrews, "he shall live even if he dies." Now listen. "And everyone," Patrick Andrews, "who lives and believes in me shall never die." He meant our spirit. The moment that he stopped breathing here, he started breathing over there. One of the terms that's used for death in Scripture repeatedly actually is a nautical term.
And it means to have pulled up anchor and to have sailed across the horizon. He just simply pulled up anchor on this earth, and he sailed across that horizon. Just as alive as he's ever been. Just as laughing and full of joy as he's ever been. And that's where he is. And that's the hope that we have. He said to Martha, do you believe this? Do you believe this? She said, yes. I believe that thou art the Christ, the Son of God. That's what he did. That's what he instilled in his family. And I think this may be the best sermon